If you're a photographer who wants to shoot global car campaigns, do you need to know CGI? And how do you get into the game? Today I'm going to share 3 key points about CGI, computer-generated imagery, why brands use it and in what capacity, and more importantly, how does a traditional car photographer fit into this process? And what kind of skill sets do you need to do CGI? The good news is, you don't need to learn everything, but more on that later. And I'll also share my personal CGI project of the Koenigsegg Jesko, yielding a series of images I'm particularly proud of. Hi, welcome everyone back to my channel. It's been a while, but I'm back. I'm Michael, a commercial and advertising photographer originally from Canada, but based in Asia since 2011. I've had the pleasure of shooting for global brands such as Ferrari, HSBC, Tesla, Volvo, Audi, Lexus, etc. Naturally, I love shooting cars and have some experience with CGI to share with you. Now, I'm making this video because, if you can catch the Spaceballs movie reference, I've combed the desert.
Found anything yet? We ain't found.
Nope, me neither. Although there are a few videos here and there about CGI, nothing quite packages all the different elements, especially for someone, perhaps like you, who wants to step up your photography game and shoot more substantial projects. So hopefully, this is the one and only CGI car photography video, until someone else does a better one. Now, fair warning, I know my videos tend to go quite a bit lengthy, and although the feedback from you shows an appreciation for my 30 to 40 minute videos, thank you, I already know that if I go into every last detail about CGI, this video will last for days. So please bear with me that I'm trying to balance detail versus time, and that this video is a general overview. And while I do as much research as possible to find good video topics for my audience, I really learn most about your photography journey when I engage with you one-on-one. So shameless plug here, I've restarted my mentoring and consulting for photographers. Car photography or not, estimating and negotiating with clients, how to market yourself, how to build a good portfolio, and no, that's not your Instagram account, or how to charge for licensing. If you're interested, you can contact me via email or DM in the description below. Okay, let's get rolling with point number 1. Why need CGI at all? Let's look at the current landscape. Every car brand is using CGI in a variety of ways, creating static beauty shots, motion shots, aka rollers, car configurators, videos, technical and safety demonstrations, and with the advancement of AR and VR, more experiential applications with virtual goggles. On a macro level, this can be seen as a series of problems we need to solve. Just like a camera, lights, software, CGI is nothing but a tool used to solve a specific problem. So for car photography, what are typical problems? Well, one common problem is for creating the risky or potentially unsafe shots. I shot the launch of the BMW 1M doing a burnout with a lot of smoke. And even if it seemed low risk, BMW did not want to do a burnout of the real car. So we created it in CGI instead. I mean, who knows? The car could have been scheduled for some stage or launch event the next day, and that would have been a disaster if it was damaged in any way during a photo shoot. But I think the main problem facing car photo shoots is that the actual car is often not available to shoot because it simply doesn't exist yet. Most product launch campaigns look like this. You will notice that there's an often delay between the launch date, when the product is announced, and the day when the product is actually shipping. This is the same for cameras, computers, fashion, real estate. The factory needs time to tool up the assembly line for mass production. But the problem is that the car needs to be shot months before the launch date, and if the factory isn't ready yet, they can't make a car to shoot. So if possible, the goal is always to try to shoot the pre-production model, the last prototype iteration before going to mass production. But there could still be problems like it has no engine, which can limit what kind of shots can be made, or the final trim pieces aren't ready yet. And since the pre-production car often appears just before the launch date, it's very unlikely to get it early enough when the shooting is required anyway.
I love the fact that this has to be shipped off to the Geneva show tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
And
Yes.
as far as I can tell, it doesn't look finished.
There seems to be 3 main types of CGI, none of which are standardized, but are floating around the industry. On one hand, CGI can be used sparingly as a photography helper, such as changing the car color, for example. I remember doing this for Volvo for the XC60 launch. It was a photography job supplied with only a dark blue SUV, but the client also wanted some shots of a white one. For one of the images, we took a regular shot of the blue one and then overlaid a white one made in CGI and then retouched it in. As you may know, color changes are only easy when the colors are similar brightness. Light blue to light green is fine, but dark to light isn't. In this case, switching from dark blue to white was solved by CGI. On the other end of the spectrum is full CGI, an industry term for images that are completely created using CGI. Every pixel, whether it's the background or the car, everything is entirely computer generated. This is great for creating any type of location or lighting design without worrying about the weather or location changes. Now, regular CGI, or just CGI, is a combination of traditional photography and CGI, usually in the form of a CGI car composited into a real photographic background. Most users of CGI is this type, as is my Koenigsegg project, because I think photography is generally still preferred and therefore used in any way possible for backgrounds, models, props, etc. I have a contact who works in the 911 division at Porsche Germany headquarters, who says that, quote, most assets are mainly done in CGI, but if we get a shooting car in time, we prefer shooting real cars. I have two takeaways from this single sentence. Number one, when possible, photography still rules. But two, unfortunately, most of the imagery is done using CGI because, like I said, no car. Now, even though I just said CGI replaces a lot of photography, I didn't say it replaces photographers. In fact, photographers are often hired to lead CGI shoots, but in order to do so, photographers need to make some adjustments in what he or she brings to the table, and to know how the process works, which leads me to my next point. Now here's the main entree of the video, so to speak, how to shoot for CGI. And let's also include my Koenigsegg project for some practical context. The concept is a set of 5 lifestyle images that celebrates design, dynamic energy, mixed with a bit of flair and style. And if I'm going to do a personal project with complete creative freedom, it's a no-brainer to choose the Jesko, mainly because these 3D models cost about the same online anyway. So why not pick a supercar? Our other model, the human, is Ling, who's also a dancer. So it would be a real waste not to leverage the athleticism and grace of her natural movements. And her outfit leans on the modern, simple side, which matches the location colors, so she doesn't compete with the car for attention. And just to balance out the set, we also shot some solo portraits of her. Now, if this was a real photo shoot of a real car, the workflow would typically be broken down into 3 main steps. Pre-production, which is the planning, production, the shooting, and post-production, the retouching. You guys know all that already. CGI simply adds a few key steps to this workflow. Doing pre-production, along with the planning, the budgeting, scheduling, shot lists, equipment, assembling the crew, we also need to get the 3D model and prepare it. You can get these models in a couple of ways. The ideal way is also the most difficult, which is directly from the car manufacturer. For every car they make, they have an engineering CAD data that they use to program the robots on the assembly line. This same data can be repurposed for CGI, which is highly efficient and super accurate. This 3D model, also known as the wireframe or geometry, or sometimes mesh, is the exoskeleton, which defines the dimensions and shape of the 3D object. And it's made up of small triangles called polygons, kind of like pixels in a digital image. And like pixels, the more polygons you squeeze in a given area, the higher the resolution and detail. Now, as you can imagine, this CAD data is heavily guarded, and most of the time they won't just release it to a photographer or CGI team so freely, because in the wrong hands, someone can use this data and duplicate the car themselves. So unless the vendor is approved on a shortlist, they won't just give out this data to anyone. Remember that BMW 1M job earlier? It was awarded to me as a CGI job, but BMW wouldn't release the CAD data. So basically, I can't shoot the job because of the risks, yet they won't give me the CAD data as well. So fortunately, you can also buy the 3D models online. Websites such as cgtrader.com and turbosquid.com are popular e-commerce websites where all sorts of 3D models are already made to be purchased, like stock photography. In fact, TurboSquid is owned by Shutterstock. These purchase models are never going to be as accurate as the CAD data, but depending on the type of imagery you're creating, it may or may not be good enough. For BMW, it was good enough for that camera distance, but I would need a higher quality model if it was a close-up or interior shot. to prepare this model is to literally assign materials and textures to certain parts of it. In the case of a car, you would assign a glass material to the windows or a car paint material to the body. All 3D software have built-in material libraries where you can directly apply materials, refine them, or make your own from scratch. Once the model is prepped, we can move to production and shoot. For the location, I picked a relatively new M+ museum designed by one of my favorite architects, Herzog and de Meuron. Specifically, the vast outdoor courtyard surrounding the museum, which offers a variety of cool shooting spots. It's a simple design using a mixture of concrete, wood, terracotta, arranged in geometrically straight lines, which I think contrasts nicely against the Jesko's flowing, curvy lines. So this is a potential shot. I'm setting up the camera, which is an iPhone, right at the rough angle that I think I will shoot from. And I'm thinking of placing the car somewhere around here and probably having the model on this side. So right now at a 16:9 ratio on the iPhone, it's going to be very panoramic and long, but I'll crop it in right about now to show you the Fuji GFX 4:3 ratio, which will be a taller, squarer rectangle. For my scouting, I knew I wanted to get some shots in the early morning with side lighting, so we arrived before sunrise and shot until about noon, spending about an hour per shot. That's pretty quick for me, but now that I have much less to worry about without the actual car there, which make things move along a lot faster. The crew size is also smaller, with just an assistant, a model, and makeup artist, whereas a normal car shoot would have 10 or more people on set just to handle all the extra equipment and manage the car. And because this is a scaled down shoot, I was hoping to do another kind of test to see how little equipment I can use without any significant compromises. So let's get a quick peek at the gear itself. Today's camera of choice is the Fuji GFX 100S, 102 megapixels. It's more than enough pixels that we need, but it's always good to have the extra cropping options. The lens that we're using is a 32-64 f4 zoom, which is an amazing lens. One of my favorites, mainly because the full frame equivalent is a 25-50, which in my type of work for car stuff, it's perfect because most of the focal lengths I use start at 25 and they go up to about 40. So this one lens can take up all of the focal lengths that I need usually. But we are shooting portraits today as well. So in addition to the zoom, we have the 80mm 1.7. That allows for really good shallow depth of field, and we're just going to shoot it wide open. In addition, we have 2x spare batteries and the tripod. Now, the tripod is necessary because we're shooting 4CG, therefore we have to take some measurements, and I can show you that later, on the ground for how big the car is going to be. So it's good to have the camera steady. For the portrait stuff, I'm just probably going to shoot that handheld. So now this is the computer section. I always, even at the bare minimum, would like to shoot tethered. The reason is you have a big screen to view your images. You can zoom in to check your sharpness. It just allows you a lot more freedom and accuracy in judging your shots, even for exposure, without having to peer into a tiny LCD screen at the back of the camera, which usually you just can't see very much. So in this case, we have the new, at the time of this recording, the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro. And we are tethering to the camera, which is a USB-C connection. And since this is also USB-C, it's just a USB-C to USB-C cable. There's 2 of them. There's always a backup because these cables break. And it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't really matter how good quality the cables are, or how expensive they are. They all are prone to failures. And the failures can happen at the beginning when it's brand new, or it can happen later down the road. You just never know. So it's just almost a prerequisite to have more than one just in case a cable fails. Because if a cable fails, you can't tether. And if you can't tether, then you're open to a whole sorts of risks because you can't judge your images. When we're shooting in sunlight or very bright conditions, I have this lightwear hood for the laptop. And this is actually quite different from a lot of the other lightwear hoods you see out in the market today. the only one that I found that was able to shield everything from all directions, where you just peer into this tiny little hole, you don't get any reflections off the screen of the laptop. So this is like kind of like a periscope design, and you just slide the monitor in from this little slot down here, and it's big enough for your 15, 16-inch MacBook Pros or any other type of computer. So I highly recommend this, and there's really nothing else on the market that's quite like it. The tape measure is required because we go online and we find out what the length of the actual car is. And in this case, it was 4,610 millimeters, okay? So we will just pull this thing out to that length and put this in the ground, and we will shoot with this thing visible. So the CGI team later on can just know exactly how big to put the car into the scene, and it just makes it very easy for them. So this is a good and little trick that we use to make sure the scaling is right, because if the scaling's off, you can see that something's a little bit weird in the shot if the car is too big or too small. So in this case, we make sure that the car is the exact right scale. So last but not least, we talk about lighting. Now, lighting is not essential to shoot in daylight situations, but I thought it would be essential even for this minimal kit, because it offers a lot more flexibility. Because I don't know what kind of environment that I'll be shooting in, even though I did a lot of pre-production and came to scout this location previously. You never know, because at the corner of your eye, you might see something great and, oh, I didn't bring lighting and it doesn't work. I don't want to miss that opportunity. So I always think lighting, just like tethering, is a good option as a backup. And this light here is an LED. It's made by Falconize. It's not like anything super duper, but it's 100 watts. The beauty of this one is that it runs off V-mount batteries. We have one attached to it right now and two extras. It's also bicolor, so we can actually adjust the color temperature of the light to match the color temperature of the sun as it rises, because it's usually a lot warmer when it rises and cools down as it gets high in the sky. So we can kind of adjust this light to match the natural light, or not. We can play around with it independently. Now, as a CGI photographer, you're responsible for two types of images. The first is the backplate, which is just like a normal car shot, but of course without the car, while always leaving enough room in the image where the CGI car will be added later. The second type of image is probably the most technical on the photography side. Every backplate also requires a matching panorama called a dome, which is a high-res, 360-degree, spherical HDR panorama output in 32-bit. How's that for a mouthful? This special panorama requires a dedicated tripod head, which can shoot spherically, that's this way and this way. And software like PTGUI can stitch bracketed sections to make it a 32-bit HDR panorama, which captures all the necessary lighting and reflection information in your scene, so that it can be applied to the CGI car to make it look as real as possible. So I'll show you the BTS of 3 of the 5 images we shot, starting with the same spot I scouted earlier. While hair and makeup was finishing for Ling, I quickly brainstormed that she could briskly walk down the steps on the camera left, while leaving space on the right for the car. I then decided to motion blur her movement to make her less prominent, since she appears rather large being closer to the camera, so attention can refocus back on the car in the background. After about 15 minutes of shooting, we got the shot, and I made sure to shoot the dome as well before we moved to the next spot for a quick portrait. At this spot, the sun was right where I expected, giving a strong side key light. I wanted to keep it moody, so I used the LED on the left, just to give a hint of fill really close to her, since LEDs are not very bright outdoors. Shot wide open on the GF 80mm. Wow, what a nice lens. The third spot was just around the corner, where I let Ling get a bit more dynamic with a sequence of jumps on camera right. This time the car is camera left in the foreground, but only showing the rear half and massive wing, perhaps indirectly associating Ling captured in mid-flight. This is probably my favorite image in the series. Now we turn to post-production, when we put it all together in the 3D software, where the backplate is added to the scene, the CG car is positioned, the virtual camera setting matching that of the real camera, Lighting and reflections are applied via the dome, and then render the image. Now, rendering times can vary a lot. It really depends on the resolution that you're rendering to, the complexity of the scene, the number of calculations, and the computer's power. It could be a few minutes to a few hours. Once rendered, the image goes to retouching, and then voila, we're done. An added bonus to CGI is the ability to render separate elements of the image so that they can be layered on top of each other in Photoshop and adjusted independently. For example, you can render the color separately from the shadows, separately from the reflections. It's really cool. My third point is about teamwork. You know, being a photographer can sometimes feel like a lonely profession, especially for those starting out. Many of us are solopreneurs, often running the daily business ourselves. And it's never been easier to be a one-person band with the assistance of both the internet and technology, but I always draw the line when it comes to photography projects. I cannot stress enough the importance of having a supporting team. Car campaigns are already big productions, and therefore clients are already accustomed to working in big teams because they know only people with specialized skills can get the job done right. Everyone contributes to the final image in one way or another. For example, I only need to know the software just enough to show the CGI artist exactly where I want the car in the final shot. This avoids the tedious back and forth emails trying to fine-tune the position. But beyond that, he preps the model, applies the backplate and domes, and renders it. Then he hands it over to the retoucher who styles and polishes the finals. In summary, the photographer is more of a creative director in these types of projects. Similarly, I have neither the time or interest to learn how to do makeup when I know there are makeup artists out there who can do a much better job and faster as well. You are no lesser of an artist bringing in outside help if you can create better work that everyone in your team is proud of. And potential clients will see you're a team player, and that's another bonus. Assistants, makeup artists, producers, retouchers, and CGI artists are all led by the photographer's vision. And the aggregate of these individual skills will produce work far better than if the photographer did it by themselves. And these people are out there, waiting for you to connect with them, to collaborate on personal projects or possible jobs in the future. In fact, most people who want to connect with me on LinkedIn are CGI artists and retouchers. And those I collaborate with are always done through the web. I have rarely met any of these people in person or speak to them live. What I have shared with you today is how CGI works in the car industry, and I highly recommend connecting with CGI artists and even retouchers. As a professional, it is vital to make great work, but equally important, though, is the speed of which we can achieve this. Just like a professional photographer, these specialists have mastered not only their craft, but also their efficiency. Well, I guess I told you this was a big one. Thanks for sticking around. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and also let me know what kind of topics interest you for future videos. I'm trying to keep my channel more commercial and advertising photography related, but not necessarily in the car industry, as I shoot other stuff as well. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you again soon.